At Google, we define marketing as know the user, know the magic, connect the two. So essentially, know the product, know the user, and connect them. And for us, it's really important in marketing to drive these products forward because a lot of products are great, right? I thought Vine was great, and that's gone. I was a huge Google Inbox user, that's gone too. And Blockbuster used to be the best. But it's on us, marketers, to make sure we're not just building great products, but it's for the right users. Because if we don't tailor them, then you might get the wrong users, or you might get lucky and get some of the right users, right? But not always. So for this presentation, I'm going to briefly talk about the product. I didn't come here for a sales pitch on Flutter, but I think just to lay out context on what it is, so you have a little better understanding, and then who our users are. But I want to focus most of this on the connection part, because I think that connecting the two, that's where the really interesting part comes out of, and that's where I hope that a lot of things can be applied to beyond just Flutter or Google and beyond just the developer market. So I'll start with some facts, right? We spend 15% of our time every day on our phones. That's over 10 years of our lives. Just to put that in perspective, many of us were holding BlackBerries 10 years ago, right? But not only that, we check it 52 times a day. I am glad that not many of you are checking it now, but imagine if we added the time on our tablets and laptops as well, right? So this brings us back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which, as many of you know, says that we as human beings have needs from the bottom, like food, water, and shelter, and the top, self-actualization. But as some of you might know, there's been a shift in this hierarchy to reflect the new reality we live in, which looks like this. I actually think you can add one more layer to this. There we go. Right? So clearly, we use our phones and our devices a lot. But building for those devices is a big challenge. Let me give you an example with using Slack, because I know with the Product Marketing Alliance, everyone here is using Slack. Right? So the Slack app. Many of you might use the app on your iOS device, on your Android devices, on your desktop, on your web. And for Slack, in order for Slack to give you that experience, they have to either build it completely separately on every single one of those devices, or they have to use a cross-platform tool, so a single place that deploys it to all of them, and you have to compromise on quality there because it's not, it's as native as if you were. But obviously, if you're building for all the devices, then it takes a lot more time and resources, right? So that's what the product is. That's what Flutter is. So Flutter is Google's tool to build, beautiful UI across multiple platforms for one code base that's actually native. So if you think about that, it allows you to build once and actually deploy it everywhere exactly in the same level of quality you would get if you were to build it natively on each platform. And that's why there's been a lot of excitement around it. Great, so now you know the products. I'm done with the sales pitch of the talk. But let's move on to the market, right? So you know Flutter. Who are the users? Developers. Now, I know many of you, when we think of developers, oftentimes we think of someone who's sitting in their basement with their windows down, hacking onto government code. But that's not who developers are, right? Developers are people just like you and me. They have their needs. They want to build great products. They want to use the best tools at their disposal. But they're a really hard audience to market to, especially as marketers, because their switching cost is huge, right? They're very tied to the tools they use, not just habitually, but also emotionally. So telling them to switch or try a new tool could be like, taking your friend who's a guitar player and she's been playing on her Fender guitar for 10 years and say, okay, for your next concert, you should use this new guitar. It's way better sound, right? Even if the new guitar has better sound, having to switch over is a huge cost for that person. So when marketing to a developer audience, oftentimes we need to be unconventional. We need to throw everything we learned about marketing aside and use kind of different types of strategies in order to reach them. So, 2 years ago when I joined the team, Flutter was very not well known, even within Google. People were like, Martin, what are you working on? What is this, right? But in the last 2 years, it's grown a bit. So I just want to show you a brief video to get you an understanding of how the developers have connected with Flutter in the last year. So let's see here. I believe they'll have to press play in the back. There we go. So as you can see, it's grown a bit since then. So now LinkedIn is saying Flutter is the #1 tool to learn among software engineers. And there's a lot more brands than just Hamilton. When I first started, Hamilton, the musical, was the first app that used Flutter. So I had to base our entire marketing strategy off one Broadway musical. I got to see the show. That was the best part for sure. But there's a lot more brands now. And so now you know the product and you know the users, developers. How do we connect them? And I think this is where I want to dedicate the rest of the talk, because I think this is hopefully the most interesting part to everyone here. So, connecting them is like drawing an owl. Right? It's just 2 simple steps. Step 1, draw some circles. Step 2, draw the rest of the owl. Right? Clearly what matters is in the details in between. Right? So in the rest of the presentation, I'm going to talk about this, which is how do we increase global awareness of usage of Flutter and lightning speed? Because from going to circles to owl, we had to question, how do we take this product that's used by one brand, Hamilton, and expand it, right, to be used globally among many developers. And I'm sure many of you can actually switch the word Flutter here to your product or a campaign you're running and relate to this question. So I'm going to, for the rest of this presentation, talk about 5 specific ways that we went from the circles to the owl, from 0 to 1. The first is to focus on the non-sexy. So oftentimes, we really want to make these detailed, elaborate go-to-market plans with 10 product plans, and it's really important to be specific. But it's also critical to lay out the groundwork first, because 90% of marketing is the non-sexy things. And when my friends that aren't in marketing ask me what I do, they always see this one campaign and they think, oh, I'm just sitting there, making these videos and that's all I do. But obviously, as many here know, that there's a lot more to marketing than that. So getting the fundamentals right is key, right? And so for us, the fundamentals, when I joined the team, Flutter was actually a really advanced technology, and it was used already internally by Google. Like our Google Ads app uses Flutter, and they used it when I joined. But there was no clear descriptor of what Flutter is. And so I made one. Very simple, just an animation video. Developers, right, they want to get right to the point, no BS or fluff. They're on Reddit, so they just want it. So I basically said, okay, in under 2 minutes, very basic animation video, nothing new. I did the voiceover. I promise you I'm not a professional voiceover actor. It was a very scrappy project. And it ended up doing very well, though. So it got 1.6 million views. So it was the most viewed video on the entire Google Developers channel that year. And it did better than the Google I.O. keynote in that channel that year. But obviously having Google back it up helped. If I launched this on my personal channel, I would have had very few views. One would be my mom, who's actually sitting here today. But the cool part about this is not only did the video do well and brought awareness, but the assets from the video were used everywhere. So it was like giving away a free brand book to all of your audience around the world. Developers really felt like we were talking to them. So I started seeing some of these visuals appear in meetups and different websites. And so, this brand was a lot more in sync after this video. And I thought that was a really interesting objective that I didn't even think about when we launched this, right? So I think the insight here can apply beyond an animation video, though. A lot of times, at least for me, I lived in this world where I assumed everyone knew what Flutter was. So I was being repetitive by just making an intro video again, even though I've been in Flutter for a while, but that's not true at all. And a lot of people felt they were introduced to Flutter because of this. And I think beyond videos, again, just revisiting what is your basic marketing that's happening. Have I, not thought about even redoing something that I've seen before could be really interesting, and especially in the developer world. I also think short form is key. Not only are developers very to the point, but I think in general with TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, we have very short attention spans. So making a very quick asset, I think, was a really good realization for me in this project. So, secure those early wins. The second one is to curate for the 99%. So you'll probably never actually meet in person most of the people you market to. At least I don't, right? So curating or thinking about how do we reach 99% of our users who aren't going to be there in person at conferences or events is really important to us. So let me share an example of how we curated for the 99%. We had a launch event last December in London where we launched Flutter, and the venue fit 250 people. But that's less than 0.01% of our target audience. So we were like, okay, how do we reach more people than that? Well, we decided to scale the event beyond the venue. So we decided to tell developers to set up their own viewing parties around the world. And we gave them, materials and resources to do that. And they essentially set up, there was 152 viewing parties across 85 different countries. And this was really cool because now we had a lot of people tuning in, but also discussing among themselves and their communities about this event. So then we decided to tailor the event for those people instead of for the 250 people in the room. So what we did is we did a pre-show where I went around and interviewed members of the Flutter team, developers, interesting stories, and we showed that before the event started online. So, I'm sure people at the event were jealous too because they didn't get access to any of this, right? It was basically if you were tuning in online, you get to see this pre-show. But we also had a post-show, and this was really interesting. As soon as the keynote ended, we went live taking questions from Twitter and online. And this helped us retain. It was amazing the amount of retention after the keynote. Usually there's like a 90% drop off, and we retained at least half of that because of this live show, because we were taking questions from Twitter and we were asking people and answering them in real time. And even though there was some people on the show, we also had members of the Flutter team answering them on Twitter themselves on their personal handle. So it really humanized the project. So when you're running a conference, consider, even if it's just right after doing some sort of a live Q&A with online attendees as well, this had really, really interesting rewards for us. Another example I'll give for this is Google I/O. So I mentioned this is our biggest conference, and at Google, even internally, it's a competition to make sure that your product is heard because Google has a ton of products. It's like working for 10 companies. So even in one conference, how do you go above the fold? Especially Flutter being so small compared to other products like Android and Chrome, right? Other developer products. How do we make sure people at least know what's going on with Flutter at a conference like this for the 99% that's not there? So let me show you one other video, just the first minute of it, of an initiative we did at I/O. Hey there, I'm Martin from the Flutter team. And today I'm going to be showing you all the awesome things happening with Flutter here at Google I/O. We have a ton of sessions going on, we have a really cool sandbox experience, and we also have people of our team and developer experts that we're going to be hearing from firsthand. So let's take a look. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think of our announcements this year?
I'm the most excited about Flutter 1.5 and what's new in it. And coming to the Dart side of it, I'm also excited about Dart 2.3.
Oh, I think it's got to be Flutter for web, the ability to actually run the same Flutter applications on mobile and web.
I would be able to build games and apps for the web, so I'm very excited about that.
There's so much possibility, and I really can't wait to start playing around with a lot of it, and also editing articles from people writing about it all.
I'm really impressed with just the nature of cross-platform that you can get with widgets, and Flutter in general is just really brilliant.
I'm here in front of the Flutter sandbox, where we have a lot of exciting things that we just announced inside. We also have a lot of excited Flutter users. In fact, I see some right now. Maybe they're drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, but it was interesting because only 7,000 developers go to I/O every year, and this is the Google-wide conference for developers. But we had over 15,000 views of that video. So we actually doubled the amount of people viewing the Flutter area or the materials than all the attendees at the conference itself, right? And also our team had put in a lot of effort building that sandbox experience, that phone wall, and a lot of those efforts that gets taken down entirely after 2 days. Even at this summit, right, you have all these booths outside, and those are going to be gone in a day or two. But I know how much effort and how much people care about that. So these videos are a way to maintain it and also bring more attention to what's actually going on to people. And I thought that was something that I think a lot more teams, even with Google, should be doing. And I see a lot more teams doing this now, which I think is great. So the third one is to provide the rod, not the fish. So we ran a contest at Google called Flutter Create, which challenged developers to build an app in under 5 kilobytes of code. Just to put that in perspective, 5 kilobytes is less than half a second of an MP3 file. But even though they had this incredibly strict limitation on this competition we ran, I want to show you a very brief video of some of the results we saw. So when we launched this, I honestly had no idea how it would go. And we actually ended up getting over 750 submissions across 60 different countries. And I think the insight that I gained from this was that we set a very strict but very broad rule. You can make whatever app you want, as long as it's under 5 kilobytes. And here were some of the results. And we saw a lot of things that I didn't even think we would get out of a competition like this if you're thinking about some sort of similar contest. For example, the person that wrote the piano app, they actually wrote a tutorial on how you can do that too. So now you can go online and take the class on how to build a piano app in under 5 kilobytes to learn yourself. Also, one person told me that their submission turned into a full-time job, and someone else said that their team had asked for a week's vacation just to work on this. So that was really fun. And also, the grand prize winner, that Compass app, actually gave us a lot more exposure for Flutter company-wide than I ever thought. So the grand prize winner was a self-taught beginner that taught himself Flutter just 3 weeks before the contest ended. And he won the $10,000 grand prize. And I was actually in China last week with him. I got to meet him. He's a very, very humble guy. He didn't even tell his wife he won. And there's an article about that. You can go read it. Google actually published my article on that. And the cool part about this is they tweeted it out, and we got a lot of press coverage because of it. So now we got all this organic, press coverage and all these people learning about Flutter because of the concept. I had no idea. Because a lot of times when you let the developers tell the story for you and you let them be the ones that are leading the message, I thought that was really, really powerful. Because a lot of times I joke that if they don't know there's a marketer on the team, that I'm doing a great job, right? Because the developers, again, not easy to market to. So it doesn't take much to go viral, but I would highly encourage you to also try a simple competition because even if it's not Flutter, I think it really gets people interested. Even if the prize, it doesn't have to be $10,000 because again, 99% of people didn't win that prize, but we gave them all certificates as well, and they were bragging about that. So it was just a good way to get them excited and sharing with the community as well. The fourth is to form win-win partnerships. So with Flutter, we actually recently expanded beyond mobile. So now Flutter, we're working on running it on the web. So same code base, but you can also run it on the web, desktop, and embedded devices. But just to announce this feature like I'm doing right now, you're like, okay, here's Martin on stage as a marketer announcing a new feature. But I think the easiest thing for us to do was to lead this with a partnership. So this time it was the New York Times. So we actually worked with them beforehand, and they used this feature to build their brand new Ken puzzle app on all platforms, so mobile, web, and desktop. And there's the link if you want to try it out, but essentially it was great because we're not just saying we're announcing this feature, we already had a really big partner immediately to show that they're using it, and that helped validate the feature for a lot of people, especially big companies. Also, we do a lot with developer stories to humanize the product a bit and show, especially for the decision makers are not always developers. A lot of times they're team leads, technical team leads, or even CEOs. So having a showcase section of our site or some testimonials obviously helps as well. Finally, let them tell your story. And this is the one that I'm most excited about because one of the reasons I love this job is that to really get to meet a lot of developers around the world. And everyone's so interesting. And a lot of times, developers will make apps and maybe not feel like we appreciate them that much, just their output. And I think that that's something that's really important to change because we don't care just about developers' apps. We care about their stories and how they're getting to those apps. So we actually launched a campaign called My Flutter Story that encouraged developers around the world to submit videos on how are they working with Flutter. And we actually combined this to form a video collage, and I'll show you the first minute of it.
I'm a software engineer born in Bulgaria.
I'm an Android developer based in Berlin.
I'm a Flutter developer.
I am a web developer.
I'm an Android engineer from Hangzhou, China.
I'm Anna from GDG Party.
I'm from Chicago, Illinois.
I am from Lima, Peru.
I am in Denver, Colorado.
Flutter has changed the way I develop, really because of the fact that I've never really developed with a bird by my side all the time.
Flutter changed a lot of things in our lives. First of all, it changed the way that we code.
I fell in love with Flutter from the very first time I saw Emily live coding the meme chat app on Google I/O.
And what's great is that Flutter is native.
Me and my partner built an app in a single day.
Our company currently works on 5 Flutter projects.
With Flutter, I don't have to go online and check the docs anymore. The way the framework is structured makes it easy to jump into the definition and learn new things.
I switched to Flutter from JavaScript and PHP. Having strictly typed code is just a game changer.
My favorite part about Flutter is that it does not limit your imagination.
So that bird is our mascot, Dash, and people love Dash. We actually had a claw machine of Dashes at our launch event, and it was by far the most desired thing. It's just for context. But these stories, it was really powerful to see this. I honestly got pretty emotional when I got these submissions because it really humanizes the users and makes me realize, all of us at these companies, a lot of times I mentioned not seeing 99% of users, but it's really amazing when you get a glimpse of people that are using the product. So I hope that these 5 tips are really helpful, and like my Flutter story, I hope that I get to learn from a lot of your stories in the coming days, and that we can learn from each other because it's such a unique opportunity to be here. So thank you so much for your time.